8. At last. 8 high. For color. Previously I finished getting this fellow very pre-stressed and delicately, tenuously assembled. You can we'll go ahead and very carefully bring it up to the camera. You can see the tail plane there is just barely reattached. It'll probably need another pass of more actually cementing it into place. And you can see his sails move over here, so I applied this sprayed on a bit of a base of just an olive, just a drab, since this will be otherwise more sensibly colored. And you can see here some remains of the cardboard it was resting on while it dried. For the second pass, that's the thing that definitely I need to improve on technique-wise. I'm still not great at evenly distributing layers of sprayed paint. Thing to consider perhaps for year 3 and the next wave of projects would be investing in an airbrush even. I think it'd be a very intriguing tool to learn to use. But anyway, there's a mostly on there layer of foundation, and you know, this just creates an opportunity to put more damage into the wing as I go about. Evening that out, you can see the ribs are kind of highlighted there because I did a bit of sanding off the worst of it. The chance for more stress. We'll get into there, but yeah, this is terribly delicate, and at this point, like for the tail plane back there, I think the paint is now serving as more of an adhesive than the cement or the plastic itself are at that point. That's load-bearing paint now. So I'm going to be very careful about that, and that is also the bulk of the work that is to be done paint-wise, so it's kind of secondary. It's gonna be our main passer of time. So, do that second out of the session, because the first thing to do... Careful. Careful. To return to the Lee, which was on the verge of completion. It was just waiting for the physical modifications that were finished up previously of getting the lights into there. And also providing necessary basis for the commander, wherein now, yeah, I've just thrown that same chrome onto him. Man has become Future Man. So some degree of highlighting might be thrown onto the fellow himself, or he turned out pretty passively just as Man of Chrome. There were a few touch-ups around where the connections were finished. That were in need of some paint, and then this will be largely the completed work, ready to be eventually shuffled off to folks on a list, stored over thuswise, folks who routinely provide the number which allow this to occur. As happens. So let us provide some small volumes of gunk from which to be in. Begin resuming the completion of this Model League. As far as things that were left to handle on the league itself, The one in particular that's been sitting there taunting me for the full year almost that this has been sitting incomplete on the desk is there on the side of the gun. There's a little splotch that got on there off of somewhere else. Finally, said right. My rival had died. Righted a terrible wrong. Justice was served. Up here along the front, there's a whole stretch of tank that got sanded a little to prepare for gluing the hull down. That all gets a little bit of a cleaning. Help blend it in here because I also have this wad of clay here. A couple of those were added to help like seal off the edge so the light doesn't bleed out. When the internal mechanisms are in motion. Paint over that a little bit to help blend it into the surrounding vehicle. Immersed, as though within the void. That might be all of it. Set that down very carefully. The whole thing over and confirm anywhere else where I would want do a final pass. Also, I could clean up the deck. Upper surface here, you can see along that rail. Bunch of spots there that are a little unkempt. Sharpen up that line. It's always the thing, though. There's... the farther along you get with something, the smaller the mistakes or other unplanned features you'll begin to notice. Completion doesn't really exist. Completion is wherever you decide to stop. Completion is in the mind. It's actually just spreading that around, some of that got onto the rail itself, and so now the solving one problem creates its appropriate anti-problem. Just two brothers. Work back and forth until we kind of converge on a good enough line. Already, that might be the candidate there. That overhead view, that's pretty clean. Clean as anything else about the vehicle. For a brief go around, I think that'll do it, outside of making any decisions about if I would want to add some degree of highlighting to the commander. He is otherwise ready to ride forth and dispense rhythm. Then brings us the main event. The Camel. Our wonderful battle-damaged son. Re-stressed. And ready for action. Shuffling as I go ahead and retrieve the box for some color reference here. Fairly colorful creature. Plenty to a camel. In first for the projects on these streams, we are going to be mostly respecting what this vehicle actually looked like. Just shot up a bunch. You take a regular camel and then you fuck it up a bit. That's a battle camel. The uncle of the sky. For that, gonna need some silver for metallic highlights. Bits of this that are playing pretty vibrant reds. So very good to see that the paints being worked with here are, most of these have indeed been sitting on the shelf. That's the previous season, and appear no worse for wear for having done it. Need a bit of a wiggling to wake them up, and then they're good to go. And some are being freshly added to the collection that will gradually build a complete spectrum. For this in particular, out of respect for the fact that we're going to be painting the sensible colors, I went and acquired many more slightly different greens. And then appropriately, karmically balance this with one more drastic green for use in the appropriate scenarios. The high intensity green. Alright, so with all of those in play, there's some work to be done up front. Starting with metallic bits. As may come as a surprise, this plane is not entirely made of wood. It is confirmed to have possessed at least one metal component. We finally have firm archaeological evidence. Process of being complicated. The camera might not be conveying how very delicate and wobbly this is wound up beyond its previous status as an already very fragile structure. Everything could shatter at any moment. And it would all be according to plan. It's just more battle damage. Depending on how this unfolds, I may settle for just going ahead with a partial disassembly and then gluing everything back together after the fact. Be it also noted, silver on olive drab is not the highest contrast combination of color. At least not in this lettering. Not when it is the nature of the piece that most of it is shadowed by itself. Demand many passes before attaining any degree of completion. And there we go, already one of the tailplane has disconnected. The other one is on a bit more firmly though, so I'm going to give it a chance to maintain its position on its own merits. I think it has what it takes. I think it can make it on its own. Structure fail will not be because it was denied the chance to try. That is going on much better. Our high visibility clown wheels. Much better job of asserting themselves against the background noise. Arrange that at the camera for viewing. Every aspect of this would need like 2 or 3 passes in order to really be confident that anything is taken hold. It is also the inner surfaces that have that clown coating. Another one of those things that perhaps would have been easier to approach with painting before assembling, but that's not how I've decided to roll. Also, probably would have been helped by setting up the wheels so they could spin, rather than cementing them in place, but that was an outlandish notion with these parts at this scale. If this were perhaps twice as big, maybe that would have mechanically worked out. But with the amounts of material available to work with on this small bird, I just kind of have to scoff at that, just no. There's a tiny dent in each of these caps. They expected, at some point, that I'd be able to put the wheel onto the spoke there, and then glue the cap onto the spoke sticking through the wheel, the like 1, maybe 1.5 millimeter of spoke sticking through the wheel into a matching dent in the cap without fusing the wheel in place while doing so. Which, okay, that's certainly a plan, that's an instruction, that's a design. Did you remember to include the nano machines that are supposed to apply this glue to exactly where you think it will fit? Did the shop forget to include the team of elves that are supposed to handle those small tasks while you sleep? Perhaps that's why it's a Revel of Germany kit rather than one that is directly sold overseas. We do not have the hidden people on the new continent. The miniature kits must account for that. We have a whole different spiritual ecology. There are plenty of domestic uses for a chupacabra. None of them are fine motor skill. They are not a creature that will make you shoes or baked goods. But for home defense, nothing better. Nothing stops intruders like a chupacabra. Though, of course, naturally, that's down in the warmer climes. They don't make their way up into the winter latitudes. You have to make do with a different set of beings of myth. So that all changes as the temperatures shift. And it is the future. We could always engineer some sort of Arctic chupacabra. Strictly speaking, you'd want to rename it, since it's right there in the name, the thing it's supposed to be eating that it won't find on the ice. Unless we first make snow goats. The same animal would probably have no trouble attacking deer. Seals. Maybe team up to take down a moose if they're feeling especially adventurous. Life finds a way. Doubly so for imaginary life. How finicky it's been just to access the gun, and don't like the odds of getting at the aviator. Well, maybe less so. I mean, he's exposed to the back, be able to get at his hat. Relative accuracy. Since starting this, I haven't really gone out and surveyed a lot of other, like, bodies of completed miniature works. I don't have much of an internal sense of how fine is considered, like, really acceptable, presentable. What the normal is for things of various scales. The highest contrast of all, just go ahead and blacken up the tires here. Since these wheels are also not made of wood. Shocking, I know. One of many technologies. was finding its legs. The Great War. Yeah, once I'm a bit more confident with the process, I might consider assembling a table army of some sort. Though that would also require committing to which minis game would I actually want to play with humans using the many small fightmen. Which in turn imposes the complication and barrier to entry of find players. Wouldn't be too perilously difficult. There are some number of thriving hobby shop in the city. So it would present the secondary barrier of I don't own a motor vehicle, so physically transporting like a briefcase of tiny men. Either on foot or by public transport. That's a task. That's an adventure. I should actually wait for that to dry before approaching it with any further hues. That needs a proper chance to crystallize before we have any new layers thrown on top of that. And instead, drag my attention elsewhere. Take a bit of bronze. And so kind of the whole forward section of the fuselage around where the pilot is. And in red. These forward bits are just the slightest bit reinforced because that's where the machinery is. We're going to let this bird feel a little fancy and give it kind of a brassy finish. To all the vital bird bits. So of course we'll then proceed to mar a fair amount of that once I go about detailing all the wounds. But for now we're just getting the underlying hull put into place. But also use my variety of other greens to try and rein that back in a bit. I have kind of overextended to where that's supposed to be. It is only supposed to come back to like half the wing. As far as the forward bit, and then there's like a plate up across the back. I have no shortage of sources for opinions about table games. Rooted in varying degrees of practical experience and theorycraft and cross comparison and so forth. At this time, shortage of interest. I haven't done personal investigation. I just know I have people to go after to discuss. Grab the wrong color. Try to get a start bronzing up the undercarriage here. I suppose the ordnance itself as well. Probably a very frightful shortage of color photos of World War I things to use as references for any particulars of that. Where color film is another thing that has existed for a fair span of time. Just in very stark rarity and for great expense. Or if you go far back enough, also labor, where I think it was the case for like one very early act of color photography that they actually did multiple exposures of the same shot with different colored lenses and then combined the resulting chemistry in some manner. Have a bit of what calls itself olive as well. That use, cleaning up excesses, reclaiming bits of the plane that are supposed to be drab. And then after some of this is dry, we'll see how well it lines up what I used for the base. And I mean, probable scenario draw out of that. Is that I just go over all of the drab areas with this as well, and then you end up with kind of a more textured, nuanced layer of coloring. Especially if there's then a couple of passes of both layering paint on and then sanding a bit of it off. Create material. There's a lot of like stressing and abrasion of the plastic that I did that is actually pretty much immediately vanished under the base coat. So some new efforts would be needed in order to try and reclaim that effort to have stressed the whole structure. A bit rough. Several of the bullet holes wound up plugged after doing the spray-on layer. Not all, but some. I was actually surprised so many of them stayed clear. I was expecting to have to bore them all back out again. Mostly these ones over on this side, as they are much smaller overall. Particularly the top wing, since one pass of that involves leaving this laying upside down, resting on the wing so everything had a chance to pool in place. In retrospect, probably should have propped it up with something. Creating complicated blends of color around that region where this bronze should end farther ahead than it does right now. Gonna be some back and forth across there, but that's also not a problem since that's where I put the gouges in that side of the plane, so that should be complicated and chewed up and is going to be, you know, charred and a bit torn open. The final results, that's all well and good. Undocumented features, unanticipated features. And then, as far as stuff back around the tailplane, this is supposed to be mostly decal. There's some, like, striped patterns that go onto these that are all prefabricated and ready to be applied as needed. I'll probably bother to do that during the assembly phase rather than, well, the decoration during here on this desk, rather than leaving it as an exercise to the viewer. Allow all of that to be incorporated into what is created here. Now, just work to set up the appropriate foundations to build that on. Grammatically speaking. Plus, I'll go on to look at the further blemishes that exist from this brown layer. There's kind of areas that were built up a bit more thick, or there's some excess that's hanging over the edges. Did a little bit of trying to sand those down, but that's also complicated by this being a very delicate little structure, so you can't really go all in on trying to grind down any surface, or you will snap it in half. One must grind with care. Grind responsibly. Grind for victory. Serving to lighten up the model overall. Less so you can like see kind of a before and after between the upper and lower wing, where the upper wing has had a bit of a chance to start drying out. That's hitting about the right tone that we want. And I have deeper greens I can use to correct back in the other direction if necessary. Combinations thereof. It's a good preliminary result to see. First line of presentation. And of course, all such tones have a chance to be drastically readjusted once I go about detailing the holes. When it is time to burn and scar and otherwise really bite in there. These really want to film over again as I put the paint to them. Little encouragement back in the right direction. Gradually running myself out of places to hold these wings. As proper. When the work is truly complete, you won't need to hold it anywhere. It's a bird. It will fly. Fortunately, things get dry enough for handling pretty quickly. Hopefully enter into such a task, accepting that you're going to get a fair amount of colorful residue all over your fingers. It's part of the process, part of the experience. A little difficult to even observe the angles at which this is not finished. In its own way, serves as a good sign. There is a part of the object that is impossible to see, then you can decorate it however you want. It'll always work. As though the void. And yeah, I'll have to leave that damp side up for a moment. turn that over and get the other. In time, there will be a bit of sanding to create an exposed plastic edge, and then second attempt to glue that back to the rest of the bird. There's a pass of stronger green, and metallic stuff has had a bit of a chance to start settling in, so you can now see more contrast there. All well and good. In fact, with the head-on view, yeah, the interior of the engine there is all properly silvered up. Miss anywhere on the propeller. Small red splotch that needs correction there. Probably left over from the wheels. Fully adjusted with a few bits. Although it's probably going to be accompanied by many more fresh splotches, since this outer ring here on the engine casing, that all gets a red highlight. That is not bare metal. It's interesting to see all these early planes that have all these high visibility elements on them. There is no attempt to camouflage these early birds. Instead, effort is put in to highlight a bunch of things that were probably in some way useful to the crews, either operating or maintaining the vehicles. I suppose it would especially be the case for birds before vehicle portable radio, or at least small vehicle portable radio. That's what two pilots in flight in birds such as these need to exchange information. How are they going to do that? Just meander into shouting distance of each other and hold course and speed for a while? They'd need systems, codes. Ways to inform each other by way of acrobatic wiggle. Perhaps flags, flares, hand gestures. And of course, probably very little attempt to use these at night. There's only so much you could do to try to conceal a bird. Under daylight, morning sky. Also the altitudes and speeds that these birds performed at. The old fighting circus. Yeah, these wheels are hell. There will be no satisfactory resolution for these wheels one way or the other. Let's navigate that close to. There we go. Those are going to remain horrible splotches of one form or another. Blood wheels. One more brass onto the undercarriage. And then also on review of the reference image that I have. If I looked on the first pass, that there is also the first strip of material up there at the front. You can kind of see the edge of a panel there on the model. That bit should be silvered. That forward layer. We'll just quickly go over that. And perhaps the two intermingling will create a bit of texture, a bit of substance. Layer on some character, some history. It all should serve well enough, since the follow-up to all of this will be figuring out how to take the entire model and really dirty it up for the damage. It involve a lot of dry brushing, involve figuring out how dry brushing really properly works, putting it to use. Now the first pass is just about getting all the lines drawn, covering broad areas. And if the right stray scraps of color wind up in the wrong places, well, yeah, that's just part of the product now. That's, shrapnel, yeah. Bits all over the place. One 72nd scale, thoroughly chewed bird. All very alarmingly flimsy to work with. The impact of brush strokes makes the whole thing wiggle and bend. And I suppose fair aircraft are quite wiggly at full size. And if you envision this brush as being 72 times larger than it actually is in my hand, that would have some weight behind it. Alright, so you are probably workable now. Yep, that's an accessible level of drive. So we can flip you over. Apply as needed. Gesture. Just enough. So, starting to look pretty satisfactory for an overall first pass. The effort. Certainly no part of the vehicle we haven't now taken a bit of a swing at, so it's all likely in need of a chance to dry off. I'll wrap this up shortly, but just first, let me just put a little bit of a mark on each of my holes. The starter to work from. And also doing so kind of poke the holes back into the spots where the paint is very sorely tempted to try and reclaim the space. This Camel is actually very high-tech and cutting-edge. Look, it's self-repairing. Made of memory wood. Highly advanced nano tweed. Sneak in a little irregular splash around each of these. Serve as a foundation for the eventual burning and scoring that we'll try to put around them. Here, this one. Essentially, in effect, I'd like to try to accomplish with some of these wounds as well is maybe try to have one of them still smoldering a little. Try to layer in tiny bits of red and orange that are sleeping under the surface. Now we just get our hooks in there. Foundations. And also re-establish where I put all those dents in the sides of the fuselage. Since those have managed to get filled in a fair deal. Over the drab. Quickly brush on reminders of where those are. Go ahead and gouge them back out again with a file after things are dry. Yeah, there we go. That is various bases covered. Take the final effect to just touch up a splotch noticed at the last minute. Crop nice and clean. Set down the brush. Allegorically wash my hands before then proceeding to temporally engage in all manner of cleanup. As from bare plastic, the first pass, the preliminary work, foundations on which to build destruction. Hard, but small, and slightly worn. In need of some rest and repair, and a good home, somewhere, somehow. Pennies.